I'm Lauren Hayes, 29 years old, and for 6 long years I quietly kept a roof over my parents' heads, paying their mortgage, covering the electricity, even footing the internet bill my younger brother enjoyed for free. I never asked for gratitude, never once complained. But at my uncle's birthday dinner, my father lifted his glass and declared, "You've ruined our lives, you're nothing but a burden." My mother nodded beside him, sealing the verdict. In that moment, I set my fork down, met their eyes with a calm smile, and knew I was done. They had no idea the storm I was about to unleash. Before I dive into this story, tell me where you're watching from and hit like and subscribe if you've ever been treated as the outsider in your own family. When I was 8, I made a habit of creeping into the kitchen before dawn, scrambling eggs just the way my father liked them. I'd set the plate on the table hopeful. But most mornings, Richard never came down until the food was cold. When he did, he'd barely glance at it, mutter something about being late for work, and rush out. I told myself maybe one day he'd notice. Maybe one day he'd see me. Marianne, my mother, had a smile that looked sweet to strangers, but sharp up close. She had a way of turning her approval on and off like a light switch. When neighbors visited, she called me her little helper. But behind closed doors, every problem seemed to have my name written on it. If money ran short, it was because I needed too much. If she was tired, it was because I never did enough. The math of blame was always simple in her eyes. I equaled burden. Daniel, my younger brother, was the opposite story. If I was the shadow, he was the golden boy glowing under every spotlight. No rent, no chores, no lectures. He drifted through the house as though invisible weights lifted from his shoulders while mine were piled higher and higher. Dad loved to say Daniel just makes good decisions. He said it so often it became less a compliment and more a family motto, one that left me wondering daily what wrong turn I had taken simply by existing. Years blurred together, but the patterns stayed the same. I paid rent for the smallest back room with the sticky window. I paid the internet bill so Daniel could game all night with friends. I covered electricity, sometimes even part of the mortgage. 6 years of funneling my paycheck into a house where my name was spoken only in frustration. 6 years of proving or trying to prove that I belonged under the same roof as the people who birthed me, and still I was the mistake. Sometimes at night I stared at the cracked photo frame on my desk. It held a picture from when I was 12, me, Daniel, and Richard at a 4th of July fair. My father's arm wasn't around me. It rested firmly on Daniel's shoulder. Even in the frozen stillness of the photo, I could see the pattern me slightly to the side, smiling too wide, trying too hard. That picture was a prophecy I carried into adulthood, a reminder that no matter how much I gave, I would never be enough. By the time Uncle Robert's birthday dinner rolled around, the weight of all those years pressed so hard against my ribs, it felt like my chest might crack. The party had started warm enough. Relatives I hadn't seen in years pressed food onto my plate. Daniel showed off pictures of his new dog, and for a brief moment, I let myself pretend I belonged. The dining room glowed with amber light from the chandelier, laughter spilling like wine across the long table. But even in laughter, I felt Richard's gaze heavy and waiting. I knew that look. It was the pause before the blow, the calm before the storm. And when he finally struck, his voice carried like a hammer through the clinking glasses. "You've ruined our lives, Lauren. You're a burden." I felt my fork freeze in midair. Around me, the table cracked in silence. Uncle Robert's smile faltered. Aunt Linda studied her plate. Daniel sank into his phone like the screen might shield him from the blast. And Marianne. My mother curled her lips into a small, bitter smile, the kind she saved for punishments she believed I deserved. It was supposed to be a celebration, a night of family stories and too much food. Instead, in that moment, all the years collapsed onto me at once. Every unpaid thank you, every ignored effort, every whispered insult I had swallowed burned through me like fire. But here's what surprised me. It didn't burn me down. It cleared me out. Shame never came. What filled me instead was sharper. Clarity. I slowly set my fork down on the table, looked my father in the eye, and smiled. A smile that said, "You think you've broken me, you've just set me free." I didn't answer my father. I didn't explain myself to my mother. I let the scrape of my chair against the hardwood say everything I refused to say with my mouth. The chandelier hummed. The roast cooled. Forks hovered in the air like startled birds. I smoothed the napkin on the table as if I were tucking a secret into a pocket and walked out of that glowing dining room like it was a stage I had finally learned to step off. The hallway smelled like lemon cleaner and beef drippings, a Sunday comfort turned sour. Family photos lined the wall, Daniel's soccer trophies, Richard in a stiff suit, Marianne at a charity dinner, and in each frame I was either missing or blurred at the edge, a ghost caught by accident. I passed them one by one, and each one slid off me like rain. My room at the back of the house looked smaller than it had that morning, as if it knew I was leaving. The window stuck half an inch from the frame. The air leaked in with a whistle when the wind picked up. The bed was unmade, one sock half hiding beneath the sheet, like a white flag. I crouched and tugged the old suitcase from beneath the bed. Its zipper teeth grinned like a dare. I opened drawers and didn't linger. Jeans, shirts, the sweater with the snagged cuff, the black dress I wore to 3 different graduations that weren't mine. I took the fireproof box from the closet shelf and set it in the suitcase like a heart birth certificate, Social Security card, passport, a thin folder of pay stubs that proved I had carried this house for years, even as the house pretended it didn't know my name. I kept waiting for my hands to shake. They didn't. It felt like swimming to the surface of a lake I'd been under for too long, lungs burning, arms slow, but the light getting clearer with every kick. In the kitchen downstairs, someone laughed too loudly, forced brittle, and the sound traveled up the stairs with the clatter of a serving spoon against porcelain. I rolled socks into tight fists, tucked them into corners, zipped the suitcase halfway, then paused to breathe. The breath didn't catch the way it always did when Richard called me into the living room to talk like adults. It moved through me clean. The door creaked, and Marianne appeared at the far end of the hall, a glass of red wine balanced in her hand like she'd practiced for it. Her eyebrows arched when she saw the suitcase. "Where are you going?" she asked, quiet and sharp the way a needle is quiet and sharp. I didn't answer. The question wasn't a question. It was a leash, and I'd felt it snap. I walked past her, and the perfume she wore, the one with the powder floral top note, hit me the way old music does a memory wrapped in sugar and rules. She turned, lips tightening. "Lauren." I kept going. At the foot of the stairs, Richard's voice carried in from the dining room mid-sentence with Uncle Robert. He saw the suitcase and went silent. For a second, his eyes flashed the way they did when I was 12 and spilled orange juice on the tablecloth like I had offended the shape of the room. He opened his mouth maybe to throw a final word like a brick, but all that came out was a sound half swallowed by his own pride. I didn't offer him a scene to meet. I gave him my back and the soft click of the front door as it opened to the night. Cold air hit my face clean and hard, rinsing the house from my skin. The porch light cast a pale circle on the steps. A moth threw itself at the bulb, frantic for a heat that would burn it. I was done being that moth. The suitcase's wheels bumped down the last stair, and the sound, small, practical, felt like a drum roll nobody else could hear. My car waited under the maple tree, where the streetlight flickered like a bad confession. I slid the suitcase into the back seat, got behind the wheel, and just sat for a beat, fingers pressed to the leather, listening to the thud of my own pulse. Inside the house, someone started a story. Laughter followed like an old reflex. The night took it and thinned it until it sounded like the past. I didn't have a plan as big as a billboard. I had a plan the size of a breath, not here. I turned the key. The engine caught. My phone vibrated on the passenger seat, Marianne calling. Then home. Then Richard. Then Aunt Linda. I let them stack unanswered one atop another, a tower of expectation wobbling by itself. The neighborhood slid by the Hendersons' porch swing, the mailbox with peeling paint, the hydrangeas that never bloomed blue no matter how much Marianne acidified the soil. I didn't look back at the house. A person can turn into salt like that. Across town, I pulled into the gravel lot of a small building with postage stamp windows and tired ivy clinging to brick as if it were climbing toward a better roof. I'd bookmarked the listing 2 days ago, a studio with a kitchenette that pretended to be a kitchen if you didn't ask it hard questions. The landlord, a woman with gray hair and tennis shoes, lived upstairs and answered the door with a wary kindness. We spoke in the soft language of people who don't want to explain their lives to strangers. I handed over first month in deposit from savings I had named Get Free in my banking app and never told a soul about. 10 minutes later, she gave me a key, heavy enough to feel like proof. The studio greeted me with its honest smallness, a single room, one window wallpaper peeling at the corners like scabbed wallpaper always does a refrigerator that hummed like it believed in steady work. I set the suitcase on the floor and it thumped loud in the new quiet. No TV blared, no footsteps above me belonged to men who liked to pace before scolding. I filled the lone mug with tap water and sipped like I had to teach my body that this water counted. Then I sat cross-legged on the bare mattress and finally turned my phone face up. Missed calls so many that the screen truncated the list and offered me "see more" like it was a suggestion to revisit pain. Messages stacked like threats and prayers. "We raised you. You owe us. You're tearing this family apart. Don't do this to your father. Come home now," mixed in the sharp ones. "Ungrateful. You'll regret this. You think you're better than us." Shame tried the doorknob and found it locked from the inside. I scrolled and felt anger move through me like a clean flame burning off the damp ropes I'd mistaken for warmth. Then Daniel, "They think you'll crawl back." I stared at his name thumb hovering memories, crowding the nights I paid the power bill so his game wouldn't glitch the mornings I left cash on the counter with a post-it that said "Internet" in my tidiest handwriting, the way he never looked up during Richard's lectures, because looking up would have turned him into a witness. I answered. He spoke in a whisper like the walls at home had grown ears. "They're freaking out," he said. "Dad's pacing. Mom's crying. They keep saying you'll come to your senses." "My senses are the problem," I said, and my voice didn't wobble. He exhaled a sound that told me he believed me, and also that believing cost him something. "Mom's in the office," he added, "digging through old mail. I think she's looking for your info." My spine went cold the way metal goes cold when a shadow passes over it. Old files, old trust. My social security number written on a teen-year form when I still thought safety and control were synonyms. "Play dumb," I said. "If she asks about me, you know nothing," he promised in that teenage way, earnest, already tired, wanting to be good at everything at once. I set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. A water stain had spread like a continent nobody had named yet. Beneath it, the refrigerator kept humming its soft hymn. The freedom here wasn't dramatic. It was granular. It lived in the way I could leave my shoes in the middle of the floor and apologize to no one. In the way the light from the street edged the blinds and didn't have to be perfect to be mine. In the way my chest, for the first time in a long time, expanded all the way. Clarity is not fireworks. It's a key turning. It's a door closing with your hand on the knob, your feet already moving forward. I opened my laptop and the blue-white glow washed the room like the first quiet dawn. I opened the Get Free spreadsheet that held numbers Marianne didn't know. I looked at dates and balances and the simple math of surviving without paying for the people who called me a burden. And as if the night wanted a line, I could underline twice my phone lit up with a text from Marianne, 8 words that sounded like a curse disguised as a blessing. "Don't come back. We're done." I typed, "Okay." Then before my hand could remember old obedience, I added, "I just stopped paying your bills." I hit send and set the phone face down. On the other side of that small rectangle, a hive erupted, calls, messages, notifications crashing into one another. In my room, nothing shook except the steady hum of a life beginning. I wrapped the sweater with the snagged cuff around my shoulders and sat with the new quiet, surprised to find it wasn't empty. It was full of my own voice, finally audible, saying the one true thing in a language even my bones understood enough. The morning came without ceremony, gray light slipping through the blinds of the studio like a hand brushing my cheek. For the first time in years, I didn't wake to Richard's voice booming through the hallway or Marianne clattering pans like punishment. I woke to silence, and silence felt like wealth. But peace rarely lasts in a Hayes story. My phone buzzed Daniel's name. His voice was low, conspiratorial. "Lauren, she's in the office again. Mom's got a stack of your old mail. I saw your bank statements in her hands. I sat up straight, the thin blanket falling from my shoulders. Why would she still have those? I threw everything out when I left for college. You left some. Daniel whispered, guilt lining the edges of his words. They never throw anything away. She's digging for your social security number. The air thickened, pressing against my skin. A mother searching her daughter's life like a thief. Listen carefully, I told him. If she asks you anything about me you don't know. Nothing. You play dumb. I already did. His voice cracked a little. But Dad's not letting this go. He keeps saying you'll come crawling back. I laughed without humor. He's wrong. They both are. We hung up and I sat cross-legged on the mattress with my laptop glowing like a shield in the half-dark. My fingers moved with precision. I didn't know I possessed new passwords longer and stranger than any memory. I added two-factor authentication, updated security questions, switched email addresses, even linked accounts to the P.O. box I'd quietly opened months ago, labeled in my own head as exit plan. Each click was a door slamming. Each confirmation email was a lock snapping shut. Yet I couldn't shake the chill running beneath my ribs. If they had my number, my old statements, they could already be trying. The next call wasn't from Daniel. It was my bank, a woman's voice, careful professional. Ms. Hayes, we need to verify someone attempted to access your account yesterday over the phone. They failed the security questions. Do you know anything about this? Yes, I said softly. I know exactly who it was. When the call ended, I closed my laptop with a snap and pressed both palms against it as if I could hold the secrets inside with sheer force. It struck me that Richard and Marianne weren't just angry parents now, they were adversaries. They weren't trying to pull me home with guilt anymore. They were reaching claws into my financial veins. They weren't satisfied with my absence. They wanted my ruin. The studio suddenly felt too small. The wallpaper peeled at the corners, shadows thickened in the seams, but it was mine. Mine. I wasn't going to let them turn it into another prison. By late afternoon, Daniel called again. His words tumbled out fast. Dad called Uncle Robert. He asked if he still knew anyone who could get information. Robert told him to drop it, but you know Dad. I did. Richard had never dropped anything he believed was his. He was the kind of man who thought blood was a leash and money was proof of ownership. And then Daniel's voice lowered even more. Mom and Dad brought someone over last night. Mark, sorry, Tom Keller. You remember him, Uncle Robert's friend. The guy who's not really on the right side of the law. I remembered. Bald head, quiet eyes, a man who stood at family barbecues without ever flipping a burger, always watching. My stomach tightened. Why him? Daniel hesitated. Dad said he needed someone who knows how to make people cooperate. The words crawled over me like spiders. Not legal, not safe. I thanked Daniel, told him to stay quiet, and ended the call. The hum of the refrigerator was suddenly louder, like the room itself was holding its breath. I pulled the fireproof box closer, checked every document twice, then tucked it beneath the mattress like a buried treasure. This was no longer about hurt feelings. This was about survival. I thought of the moth at the porch light wings burning against a glow it thought was warmth. That was me once throwing myself against Richard and Marianne, desperate to be seen. But I wasn't that moth anymore. I wasn't flying toward their fire. I was learning to move in the dark, silently where their hands couldn't reach. I made tea in the chipped mug, the steam curling into the air. I sipped, steadying myself, and whispered into the empty room. You want a war of bills? A war of names. Fine, but you'll never see me coming. The studio swallowed my vow, and for the first time since walking out of that house, I felt not just free, but dangerous. The storm didn't crash all at once. It bled in drop by drop. The first was guilt. Marianne's texts turned syrupy, her words sticky and sweet. Honey, we didn't mean it. Come home. We can fix this. Dad's worried sick. I read them under the dim yellow glow of my studio lamp, my jaw tightening. The same woman who had smiled when Richard called me a burden now wanted to play Mother of the Year. The messages piled sugar hardening into salt ungrateful. Heartless. You'll destroy this family. Then came Richard's calls, his voice like gravel on the voicemails. Lauren, you don't get to walk away from us. You think you're smart, you'll regret this. Sometimes the anger cracked, replaced with false reason. Just come back. We can talk like adults. But I knew his version of talking. Talking meant his voice, my silence. Talking meant surrender. The next drop was intimidation. One night, leaving the grocery store with nothing but bread and soup, I felt the hairs on my arms rise. In the rearview mirror of my car, a black SUV lingered, two long headlights shadowing me even after I changed lanes twice. At first, I told myself it was nothing, but when I pulled sharply into a gas station, the SUV slowed, parked across the lot. I stepped out with my grocery bag clutched tight, pretending calm. Through the windshield, I saw him, Tom Keller, bald head gleaming under the fluorescent lights, hands loose on the wheel, Richard in the passenger seat, staring at me like I was prey that had wandered too far from cover. I didn't flinch. I walked into the store, bought a bottle of water I didn't need, and paid cash while watching them from the corner of my eye. They didn't move. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Daniel, Dad's out with Tom. Be careful. They're talking about making you understand. When I returned to my car, I drove like a hunted animal, random turn side streets doubling back. The SUV followed, never too close, never too far. My pulse thundered. Then, like a beacon, the police station appeared ahead. I swung into the lot, braking hard, right in front of the glass doors. Red and blue decals glared from the windows. The SUV slowed, then glided past, disappearing into the night. I sat there, hands welded to the steering wheel, my chest a cage rattling with each breath. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had grown up begging Richard to see me. Now he saw me clearly enough to chase me like quarry. That night, Daniel called again, his voice urgent. They're losing it. Dad punched a wall. Mom's been crying to Aunt Linda, telling everyone you stole from them. They're calling relatives, trying to make it sound like you abandoned them after all they sacrificed. Sacrificed. The word broke from me, sharp and bitter. I paid their mortgage, Danny. Their lights stayed on because of me. What exactly did they sacrifice? Daniel hesitated. I know. But they're saying it loud enough that people will believe it. A smear campaign. They weren't just trying to break me financially. They were trying to erase my truth. The next morning, I sat in a small office across town, opposite a woman with sharp eyes and sharper posture. Victoria Reed, attorney. The sign on her desk read, Advocacy with Teeth. I told her everything: the bills I'd covered, the rent I paid, the fraud attempts, the SUV, Tom Keller's shadow. She listened, not with pity, but with calculation. If they try to evict you after you've left, it won't hold in court, she said crisply. If they use your identity to open accounts, that's fraud. Harassment, stalking, destruction of property. These are criminal. You keep every voicemail, every text, every photo, and you call me the second they step foot near you again. For the first time in weeks, I felt the ground beneath me firming. I wasn't a daughter begging for fairness anymore. I was a client, arming for war. That night, sitting on the bare mattress in my studio, I stared at the screen of my phone. Dozens of unread messages blinked like tiny red eyes. We need you. We'll find you. You can't run forever. But between the threats and the guilt, between the sugar and the salt, I saw something new: desperation. Richard and Marianne weren't all-powerful gods in their kingdom anymore. They were drowning swimmers clawing at me to stay afloat, and I finally was learning to let them sink. It was just after sundown when Daniel's text arrived. They know where you live. Dad's raging. Mom's crying. Tom's with them. Be careful. I sat frozen on the mattress, phone clutched so tightly the case pressed lines into my palm. I'd parked my car a block away, cautious instinct already warning me. Now, it wasn't just instinct, it was fact. I crept to the window and peeled back a sliver of the blind. Minutes later, headlights crawled down the street. A black SUV. It stopped in front of my building engine, idling like a predator's growl. The doors opened. Richard, first face dark with fury, shoulders squared like he was about to march into battle. Marianne followed, mascara streaking down her cheeks, her sobs loud enough to carry up to my second-floor window. Behind them loomed Tom Keller, arms folded across his chest, his stillness more threatening than any shouted word. The pounding began. My front door shook under Richard's fists, each blow rattling the thin walls. "I know you're in there, Lauren." His voice thundered down the street. "You think you can just walk away. You think you can abandon your family." Marianne's voice tangled with his higher, shriller. "You can't do this to us. We need you. Please, baby, don't ruin us." Tom said nothing. He just stood at the base of the stairs, scanning the street like a hired sentinel. I pulled my phone out, pressed record, and zoomed in through the cracked blinds. The camera caught everything: Richard's fists slamming against the door, his boots striking at the wood, Marianne's tears like daggers, Tom's silent watch. Proof. For once, their violence was not hidden behind closed doors. I dialed. 911, what's your emergency? "My parents are trying to break into my apartment," I said, voice low, steady. "They're shouting, threatening me. There's a man with them, not family. I feel unsafe." The dispatcher told me to stay inside. Officers were on their way. Downstairs, Richard's voice cracked into rage. "You owe us. You were raised on our money, our sweat, our sacrifice. You don't get to just leave." My hand shook, but I forced myself to hold the phone steady, recording every word. Then the flashing lights cut through the night. Red and blue washed over the SUV, over Marianne's tear-streaked face, over Richard's clenched fists. 2 officers stepped out, calm but commanding. "Sir, ma'am, step away from the door." Richard spun, face-flushed, jaw tight. "She's our daughter. She owes us. She can't lock us out like this." The officer didn't waver. "Being her parents doesn't entitle you to her money, her home, or her freedom. Step away now." Marianne sobbed harder, but even her cries sounded rehearsed, like she had switched from menace to victim in a single breath. "She stole from us," she wailed. I stepped out onto the balcony, phone raised. "No," I said loudly enough for the officers to hear. My voice surprised me, clear, strong. "I paid their bills for 6 years. Rent, internet, electricity, mortgage. They tried to open accounts in my name. They followed me here. And tonight, they tried to break my door." I held up the phone. "I have it all on video." The officer took the phone from me, carefully played a snippet of the recording. Richard's voice thundered out. "You owe us. You can't walk away." The officer's face hardened. He turned back to my parents. "Sir, ma'am, if you try this again, you'll be arrested for trespassing and harassment." For a long moment, no one moved. Tom Keller broke the silence first, muttering something under his breath as he slid back into the SUV. Marianne followed, casting me a look that twisted between fury and desperation, a look I had known my entire life but had never seen, turned powerless until now. Richard lingered, fists curling and uncurling at his sides. His eyes met mine, and for the first time, I didn't see a father. I saw a man stripped of his throne, flailing in the ruin of his control. Finally, he spat on the ground, climbed into the SUV, and slammed the door. The vehicle pulled away, its taillights shrinking into the night. The street grew quiet again, the hum of summer insects returning like a chorus. The officers gave me instructions, handed back my phone, told me to stay safe. When they left, I stood alone on the balcony, air cool against my skin, the video of my parents' downfall still glowing on my screen. A text buzzed from Daniel. "They're still ranting. But I think you finally got through to them." I looked down the empty street at the spot where the SUV had been and felt the truth echo inside me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't their burden. I wasn't their scapegoat. I wasn't their fuel. I was mine. The street outside my apartment stayed quiet long after the patrol cars left. I lingered on the balcony, arms folded across my chest, staring at the space where the black SUV had idled like a predator. It was gone now, but the echoes of Richard's fists and Marianne's sobs hung in the air. The night was cool, steady, alive. I drew it in like medicine. Back inside the studio felt different. The peeling wallpaper, the humming refrigerator, the bare mattress on the floor, none of it looked small anymore. It looked honest. It looked mine. I set my phone on the counter, face down, and for the first time in days, I didn't feel the need to flip it back over. The buzzing had stopped. The calls had slowed. The silence wasn't a weapon now. It was a gift. I sank onto the mattress legs tucked beneath me and thought about all the years I had lived like a tenant in my own life. 6 years of bills of rent, of swallowing insults, and telling myself that maybe tomorrow Richard would notice, maybe Marianne would soften. 6 years of wearing shame like a coat too heavy for my shoulders. And tonight, all of it ended, not with their apology, not with their love, but with my choice. Daniel's texts trickled in through the dark. They're shaken. Dad hasn't stopped pacing. Mom's telling people you turned the police against them. His words carried guilt, the same guilt I had lived under for decades. I tapped back. None of this is on you. Remember that. He didn't answer right away, but I knew he'd read it. Sometimes silence is the only proof that words landed. I stood cross to the fireproof box under the mattress and opened it. The papers inside looked suddenly different, not just documents, but evidence of survival. Pay stubs, receipts, rent transfers, all the quiet proof that I had carried a household while they branded me a burden. For years, I thought these papers meant nothing. Tonight, I saw them for what they were, the map of my endurance. At the bottom of the box was a folded scrap of notebook paper. My grandmother's handwriting, soft, looping, a little shaky. She had pressed it into my hand on my 18th birthday before cancer stole her voice. Lauren, remember, freedom is not something they give you, it's something you claim. I had tucked it away, too scared to believe it then. Now, in this dim studio, those words lit up like neon. I whispered them aloud, and the sound filled the room, bouncing off every wall, louder than Marianne's accusations, sharper than Richard's fists. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was whispering to survive. I felt like I was speaking to love. The next morning, I walked 2 blocks to the cafe on the corner. The air smelled of roasted beans and warm bread. The barista asked my name, and I said it. Lauren, and when she wrote it on the cup, I realized how long it had been since I'd seen it without mockery attached. I carried the cup to a window seat, watched people cross the street, strangers carrying groceries, briefcases, children. No one knew me here. No one demanded rent that wasn't rent. No one called me a burden. To them, I was just a woman drinking coffee on a Tuesday morning. And that anonymity felt like belonging. Later, I stopped at the bank again, not to patch leaks, but to build. I opened an account solely in my name. I dropped cash into it, the first deposit of a future that wasn't tethered to anyone else's debts or demands. The receipt felt heavier than its paperweight. It felt like a flag staked in new soil. That evening, back in the studio, I lit a candle I had bought at a discount store. Vanilla, a little too sweet. I set it on the windowsill, let the flame flicker against the glass. Outside, the streetlight above my building sputtered once, then steadied. For years, I had been that flicker straining against wind I couldn't control. Now, steady. Even if the flame was small, it was mine. Daniel texted again that night. I think they know they've lost. Dad's quiet. Mom won't talk to me. It's different here without you. I typed back. Different isn't bad. It means things can change. I almost added, you can change too, but stopped. Some lessons people have to claim for themselves. I set the phone aside, leaned back against the wall, and let the quiet fold around me. Richard and Marianne could scream, they could smear, they could spend the rest of their lives spinning lies about the daughter who walked away. But I didn't have to listen anymore. I didn't have to carry them anymore. The candle burned lower, the flame, bending gently but never going out. I thought of my grandmother's words. Again, freedom is not something they give you. Tonight, freedom had a shape, a sound, a heartbeat. It lived in my chest, steady as my breath, and for the first time since I could remember, I was free. Have you ever had to walk away from family to finally protect your peace? Share your story in the comments below. I'd love to hear it. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapter.